We're right to go.
I'm very sorry to have to say that I won't be able to be at the reunion with Kathy and Henry. Unfortunately, I already arranged to go to a stamp show in New Zealand, which I'd booked several weeks before the arrangements came about. So I'll have to miss out. I thought I might make just a few comments that might be useful. I'm particularly sorry, having just seen the programme, that there's a cricket match, and apart from not being able to see all of you there, the tradition of CRES cricket matches a very sad thing to miss out on. I thought I might just say a little about kind of the appointment of Henry. This was at a very difficult time for CRES. We lost, Frank Fenner had clearly set up CRES amazingly well, and most able director one could imagine. And then we lost two directors in incredibly short time. There's a piece in Charlie's Aunt about people being terribly careless, and it began to look as though kind of appointing directors to CRES was verging on the Charlie's Aunt handbag story. And the directors concerned, that's Professor Taylor, who went to the triumvirate that was running CRES, and Stuart Harris, who went to run the whole of DFAT, obviously went to even more prestigious jobs than the director of CRES. But at the time, there was a feeling around the university as to whether CRES really went on. And appointing a new director to CRES is a very long and tedious procedure. The appointing panel had a huge number of people on it, all of whom were at the forefront of environmental studies of every discipline you could imagine. It was also a time when the university was just trying to be slightly more democratic about how it did these kind of things. So I was in a kind of unofficial capacity as the acting director for a very long time. The procedure was very slow, but they invited CRES to discuss amongst themselves the kind of person they'd like for a director. Now that itself was an impossible task, I may say. So we had spent a year from when it was clear we had to appoint a new director, when really nothing had happened. And one of my faults as an academic is I find it difficult to take academia very seriously. And I actually sent the Vice-Chancellor, who was Peter Carmel, the most kind of able and pleasant man you could imagine as a Vice-Chancellor, a first anniversary card saying it was the anniversary of us, the last director leaving, and could something else happen? It seems an amazing thing to do now. So I turned up at a kind of early meeting of this assembled panel to say a little bit about what CRES thought they'd like to see in a director. And very nicely, Carmel tabled at the beginning of the meeting the illustrated anniversary card that I'd sent him, which was really quite delightful. The discussion was very long, and people were saying, well, how about this kind of person? And then somebody said, well, there was a lot of discussion about people from CSIRO. And in a very embarrassed way, I said, well, from a CRES point of view, most of them were so highly specialised and really hard scientists that they really didn't fit the kind of general ethos. And somebody who was probably Ralph Slatcher, who was on the panel and a great friend of CRES, indeed on occasion at that time, CRES occasionally used to have members of CRES, and Ralph was a visitor at the time, cook a meal, and Ralph was a fabulous cook. And he said to me, in this embarrassing position, well, what about somebody like Henry Nicks? And I knew Henry slightly, and I knew Kathy slightly better, because she once helped us out at a stamp show by making handmade watermark paper. And I said, well, yes, he didn't fit that category. Obviously, he had very broad interests and encyclopedic knowledge of most things Australian. the conversation moved on. I left the room and they went into more deliberation about who they might encourage to apply. And to cut that story short, clearly Henry was the person who was appointed, and one of the great advantages was that Henry obviously stayed for a very long time as director. And I think if we hadn't had a director who didn't move quickly on to an even more prestigious post, there are a few apart from being director of CRES, the future of CRES I think would have been rather different to what it had become. When Henry was formally appointed, Sheila, my late wife, and I invited I think everybody in CRES, staff, technical, academic and the postgraduates, around to our house to meet Cathy and Henry informally before he turned up on the Monday formally. And it was actually a very convivial party. And one of the few things I have in common with Henry is that I am incredibly untidy. And Henry is also renowned for that. And this developed into a discussion between Cathy and my wife Sheila on which of their husbands was the most untidy. And it really became quite exciting. And tragically, for me, my study abuts onto the room in which we were all meeting. So there was a quick inspection of my study. And indeed, Cathy did venture to comment that she thought that Henry was slightly more untidy than I was, but these are obviously just shades of difference. And both of us were very fortunate that over very long periods of time, Margaret and Etty at least tried to produce some kind of sense out of this assembled chaos that both of our rooms were in, by putting piles of paper that looked about the same size in little piles, which was about the best that you could hope for under the circumstances. Now, I'll leave others to enlarge on Henry's contribution to the academic progress of CRES, the kind of very happy social environment in which we all performed, but to stress again that having a director who came and stayed was actually crucial to the long-term success of CRES. Again, I really am desperately sorry to miss the event. There was lots of people there looking at the list of the email list on the accompanying the programme and the rest of it, who some I remember vividly, some I had almost forgotten, but memories came back as soon as I saw their names. And my lasting comment, last comment, is that it would be wonderful if we could organise an annual or perhaps biannual, that's every 2 years, biannual's the word I want, annual or biannual get-together of CRES or the Feather School's earlier members. And by members, that's the academic staff, the secretarial staff, which used to be very large and is obviously not very large now, but all forms of technical staff, visitors of whom have come and gone over the years, of the most exciting kind of people we could imagine, and the postgraduates who've spent time in CRES. And the opportunity to get together on occasion and relive earlier times is something that I think we'd all enjoy. Last year I attended a reunion of my own undergraduate days, which was the 60th anniversary of my wife's graduation, and such occasions are really great fun. And in CRES's case, where we started essentially about 1975, it has the great advantage that most of the people concerned are still with us. So have a super time. Dingle.